Well guys, here we are for another Ghost of Tsushima video, but this time I'll be using my ROG Strix 6800 XT paired with the Ryzen 5900X, and these results actually surprised me. Let's take a look. Let's begin with the settings, then we're gonna focus on 4K native TAA with maximum settings, everything set to Ultra. And this is where I was surprised, because the 6800 XT is doing like upper 40s at 4K native with Ultra settings. It's actually doing a whole lot better than I thought it would. I thought it would probably be high 30s maybe, because on the 7900 XTX previous video, we were getting around 65 to 70 FPS in these areas with the same exact settings. So I was actually quite a bit surprised to see this. Now, is this the type of frame rate that I would personally play at? But yeah, probably not. But it's just very interesting to see that 6800 XT holds up really, really well. Now, another thing that crossed my mind is that does maybe the 6800 XT have some sort of a architectural advantage, since the PlayStation 5 is also based on RDNA 2? Now, we have seen some of this in some of the Sony games, so that could very well be the case. I guess one way to find out for sure will be when I look at the RTX 3080 Ti and we compare the two. But what I wanted to try next is go to the very high preset from the ultra maxed out settings we had previously, just to remain at 4K native and see what we can do. And yeah, we gained around 8-9 FPS maybe, just for dropping to the very high preset. And the game still looks absolutely great. So this is 4K native on the very high preset on the 6800 XT. Very impressive. Also 1% lows, everything else is great. And for this one I am actually using a Ryzen 5900X, not my 7800X 3D. Now, this game is not CPU heavy, but the 5900X, very solid CPU here, very high 1% lows, it's actually great. But before we move on to check the other settings, resolutions and FSR, I wanted to load into this compound area here, which on my previous video we tested it. This area was actually a bit more demanding than the regular open areas, and still here we're in the mid 50s with a very high preset. This is actually great, guys. With VRR display, it actually feels really, really good to play. Very impressed. Now let's go ahead and try some FSR set to quality, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and max out all the graphical settings from the very high preset and then toggle on FSR quality. So we were in the mid 40s of FPS at 4K native, and with FSR set to quality we're in the low 70s, which is actually really, really good. So if you are the type of person that does not like to use any form of upscaling, you can actually do 4K native and be around 55 FPS on the very high graphical preset. That's actually really good. And yeah, I mean 55 is not 60, but on a VRR display it might as well be. It feels really, really good. But this looks great too. FSR actually looks really good in this game. I haven't noticed any of the flickering issues like you usually see in many games. Here it actually looks very nice.
You're riding well. How are your wounds?
Mostly healed. Your bandages did the trick.
Let's now go ahead and try some frame generation, see if I can get close to that 120 FPS to max out my display's refresh rate, which is an LG C1 4K OLED TV. And when you look at that, we went from the mid 70s to very close to 120 FPS with FSR set to quality and frame generation on top with all the graphical settings maxed out. It actually looks great. It's very, very fluid, and don't mind me crashing into bushes and trees, but I'm just trying to examine, see if I can pick up any artifacts, and no, actually it's perfect. The only thing that kind of stands out a little bit is I'm getting a little bit of screen tearing just because I'm going a little bit above 120 FPS. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and turn on VSync, and we should be good and consistent. And there we go. Now we're capped to 120 FPS via VSync. You can use other methods to cap your FPS, but VSync works pretty well in this particular case. So yeah, I'm actually very impressed with the 6800 XT. It remains one of my favorite,
spot up ahead
probably
that
my
overlooks the
favorite
river.
AMD GPU and one of my favorite GPUs of all time. Just because, you know, the time that it arrived and AMD versus NVIDIA position, you know, they were able to catch up on the high end. And I love the 6800 XT. It's a powerful GPU, got plenty of VRAM, and it's very efficient, which is something that matters to me. But anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at some 1440p.
Let's look.
Okay, so I've set the game back to 4K native with ultra settings, no FSR, so we're back to the mid to high 40s now. What we're going to do is we're just going to drop from 4K to 2560 by 1440p. And the results are, we are close to 90 FPS. Perfect. I love 90 FPS for these type of games. I'd say that's plenty for me, but yeah, 80 to 90 FPS natively at 1440p. Very clean frame time. The 5900X doing a pretty good job in this game, although this game is not all that CPU demanding. But there is a couple things that stood out to me that I'll be pointing out a little bit later. But for now, this is pretty good. We could easily turn on FSR, set to quality, and we'll probably end up being close to 120 FPS. I'm sure of it. And we are actually going to try that in a second.
If they see us, they'll kill the prisoners.
Then we better stay quiet.
Before we try FSR though, I just want to go back to the graphical settings and then drop from the ultra to the very high preset, because we were able to gain quite a bit of performance by doing that. And look at that, we went from the 90s to close to 110 FPS. So this is 1440p native. I know there's people that don't like to use any form of upscaling, and if you wanted to stick to 1440p native and be close to 120, 110, well, there you go. Very high graphical preset, and you're good to go. Yeah, very impressive. If you do happen to play at 1440p ultra wide, like I actually play at 3440 by 1440, on the 6800 XT, I'm pretty sure you would be able to max every setting and be at 60, maybe a bit above 60, you know, because we were able to stay between 45 and 50 anyway with maxed out settings at 4K native. So clearly 3440 by 1440 is like 2 million pixels less, so you should be able to get that. You guys let me know if you do want me to check ultra wide. It's not a very popular resolution because most people don't game on ultra wides, but I do like gaming on ultra wide, especially these games. They look so good on ultra wide. But anyway, this is what we're getting with 1440p native. Now let's go ahead and try some FSR. We'll set all the graphics settings back to ultra and drop in FSR and see what that does for us. Back to the settings then, we're going to set everything back to ultra and then drop in FSR to quality. And we went from around 90 to 100 FPS, or 80 to 90. I thought it would be a little bit more than that. But our GPU use has dropped a little. I want to try dropping the FSR quality to ultra performance. I'm just curious to see if we're hitting maybe some CPU bottlenecks. And I think we actually might be, even though GPU use says 98%. Just kind of weird that we were able to get 90 FPS natively, and then we drop FSR to quality, now ultra performance, and we're only at 112 FPS. So that's what I was talking about earlier, that there was something that kind of stood out to me, and this was it. So I guess there is performance to be gained if you set FSR to quality with the ultra graphical preset, but strangely it's not all that much in this particular case. So that is very strange. But we still have frame generation that we could try. So let's do that. And with FSR quality and frame generation on top at 1440p, completely maxed out graphical settings, we're sitting at 150 FPS. So yeah guys, that was a little bit strange that we weren't able to get any more performance with FSR at 1440p. I mean, we were already getting 80 to 90, and then even putting FSR to ultra performance only went up as high as 120 FPS. That just doesn't seem right. Something didn't seem right. But again, you could use FSR frame generation to boost your FPS up even more, regardless of whether it's a CPU bottleneck or an engine thing. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, very, very nice overall. I'm very impressed with the 6800 XT's performance in this game, I gotta be honest. But anyway, that about does it for this video. I want to thank you for watching. Please leave the video a like if you liked it. Consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. And leave a comment below. Let me know what you think. Do you have any questions, any suggestions, or whatever it might be? I'd like to hear from you. But anyway, I hope you all have a great rest of the weekend. And I think I've made enough videos for a little while on Ghost of Tsushima. I really want to go back and enjoy it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.